The knock at midnight. The wind howled across the plains like some ancient predator, rattling the shutters of my homestead. Nights out here were always cold, but tonight the frost felt sharper, the air thinner, as if the stars themselves had pulled the warmth out of the world. I was just settling into my cot, the last embers of the stove crackling, when a sharp, deliberate knock echoed through the dark. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. No neighbor would come calling at this hour. We didn't have the kind of community where people dropped by for tea. Out here, people came to your door at midnight for one of 2 reasons: to beg for help or to make you regret opening it. I slipped on my boots, pulled my old service pistol from the wall rack, and approached the door, my breath fogged in the frigid air seeping through the frame. I opened it a fraction, and froze. A towering figure loomed outside, swathed in a black coat, shoulders too broad to be human. The faint light from my lantern revealed scaled skin glistening like wet stone and eyes that glowed faintly gold. Varen. My chest tightened instinctively. I hadn't seen one this close since the ceasefire. The Varens had been our enemies for a decade, fierce, calculating, and proud to a fault. This one stared down at me as if I was something stuck to his boot. Without a word, he stepped aside. That's when I saw her. She was wrapped in a hooded cloak, so thin she might have been made of shadows. The Varen shoved her forward, and she stumbled against my porch rail. "Your problem now," the alien growled in accented English. His voice was deep enough to vibrate in my bones. "Half-blood filth. I won't keep her under my roof." I didn't move. "You came all the way here to, what? Dump your trash on my doorstep." His lips curled, exposing sharp teeth. "In my world, her kind is an insult to the bloodlines. In yours, perhaps you have use for her, or perhaps the cold will decide for you." He turned without waiting for an answer, his boots crunching in the frost. The silhouette of his shuttle glinted in the moonlight, and within moments it was gone, a dark shadow lifting into the sky. The woman stayed where she was, hunched and trembling, her breath shallow. I stood there for a long moment, the wind snapping at my coat, weighing my options. Every bit of training from my military years told me to close the door and walk away. Taking her in could mean trouble, maybe the kind that came with blaster fire and a Varen death squad. But my conscience didn't let me turn my back on someone left in the freezing dark. "Come inside," I said finally. She flinched as if expecting a blow. Slowly, she stepped across the threshold, her boots leaving faint tracks of frost on the floorboards. I shut the door, locking it tight, and hung my pistol on the wall again. She stood near the stove, clutching her cloak as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Sit," I said, gesturing toward the worn armchair by the fire. She hesitated, glancing at me from beneath the hood, then lowered herself into the seat. The room was quiet except for the popping of the wood stove. Her hands were pale, almost human, but the tips of her fingers bore faint ridges, like the scales on the Varen outside. "A mix." The alien's words came back to me, half-blood filth. "You hungry?" I asked. A small nod. I rummaged through the pantry, pulling out a tin of stew and a loaf of hard bread. She watched every movement, her eyes tracking the food like a starving animal. When I set the bowl in front of her, she didn't bother with politeness. She ate quickly, each bite followed by another as if afraid it would vanish. "Slow down," I murmured. "You'll make yourself sick." She slowed, barely, but didn't stop until the bowl was empty. Only then did she lift her head, the hood sliding back. Her face startled me, not because it was strange, but because it was almost familiar. High cheekbones, slightly luminous eyes that shimmered with a faint golden ring, and a streak of silver in otherwise dark hair. She looked human at first glance, but the subtle alien traits drew the gaze. "What's your name?" I asked. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, "Lyra." I nodded. "I'm Ethan." She glanced toward the door, then back to me. "You should not keep me here," she said softly, her accent a delicate blend of human vowels and Varen harshness. "They will come." "Who?" Her eyes dropped to her lap. "Him, or others like him." I didn't push further. Not tonight. She was half frozen, half starved, and completely terrified. Whatever story brought her here could wait until morning. I set out a blanket and lit the second stove in the small guest room. She stood there for a moment, staring at the bed as though she didn't trust it. "It's yours for the night," I said. When I turned to leave, she asked quietly, "Why? Help me." The question made me pause. I didn't have a noble answer, just an old, stubborn instinct. Because no one deserved to be left in the cold, I said simply. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. "Thank you, Ethan." I left her there, the door closing softly between us. But even as I tried to settle back into my own bed, I couldn't shake the image of her sitting by the fire, eyes catching the light like molten gold. And I couldn't shake the feeling that letting her in had just changed the course of my life. Stranger in the warmth. Morning came late in the frontier. The sun was pale this time of year, dragging itself over the horizon as if reluctant to face the cold. I'd been up for an hour, nursing a mug of coffee at the kitchen table, when Lyra emerged from the guest room. She was wrapped in the blanket I'd given her, her cloak folded neatly over one arm. She didn't look at me at first, just scanned the room, the table, the pantry shelves, the tools hanging by the back door, like she was memorizing it all in case she had to run. "You sleep?" I asked. A slight nod. "Yes." Her voice was quiet, careful, like someone who'd learned to speak only when it was safe. "Good. There's food on the counter. Bread's a little hard, but it's fresh enough." She moved to the counter, sniffed at the loaf, then tore off a piece. She ate slowly this time, maybe because she didn't want to look desperate. I didn't press her for conversation. Sometimes silence did more than words. When she'd finished, I caught her watching the steam rise from my coffee. I poured her a cup, setting it gently on the table. She touched it like it might burn her, then took a sip. Her expression flickered, a mix of surprise and something softer. "It's bitter," she murmured, "but warm." "That's the point." I leaned back. "So, Lyra, mind telling me what happened last night? Who that Varen was?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "He was my husband." That word hit like a cold gust. "Was." She hesitated. "The bond is broken. I am no longer claimed." Claimed, like she was property. I didn't hide my frown. "And he just dropped you, hey? Why?" Her gaze flicked toward the frost-covered window. "Because I am not clean." I knew what she meant. Varens were obsessed with heritage purity. Even among their own kind, they traced bloodlines back centuries. Half-human offspring were considered an infection. "You're a hybrid," I said. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "My father was human. My mother, Varen, she died giving birth to me. I was raised among her people. They did not let me forget what I was." I remembered the way that Alien last night had said half-blood filth with the same tone a soldier used for a mortal enemy. That's a hell of a reason to throw someone into the cold. For them, it is reason enough. We sat in quiet for a while. I could feel the weight in her words, not the drama of a sob story, but the plain truth of someone who'd lived with it too long. After a moment, I changed the subject. "You plan on going anywhere from here?" She tilted her head, studying me. "If I leave, they will find me." "They?" Her lips pressed together. "His family, the enforcers. They will not allow a tainted heritage to wander free." The name made my stomach tighten. Varen enforcers weren't lawmen. They were political hounds, trained to hunt down anyone who embarrassed the elite. If they wanted her back, they wouldn't care what side of the border she was on. "Then you should stay here. For now," I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because out here, no one comes without my knowing. And I've got a few tricks if someone decides to knock." I tapped the sidearm holstered at my belt. Her gaze lingered on it, then on me. Something unspoken passed in that look. Not trust, not yet, but the faint recognition of someone who wouldn't hand her over easily. After breakfast, I went to work in the shop. My old service truck had been coughing black smoke for 2 weeks, and the gearbox wasn't going to fix itself. I caught Lyra watching from the doorway, her blanket still around her shoulders. "You ever fix anything?" I asked. She stepped inside, looking over the workbench. "I learned to repair Varen vessels, small ones. That's a start. Hand me that wrench. She obeyed, her movements precise. As I worked, she watched closely, then crouched beside me. Your design, it is simple, but it works. Simple means fewer things to break, I said. She almost smiled, a tiny, flickering thing, gone before it could settle. But for the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't look like she was waiting for the next blow to fall. Hours passed like that, the two of us working side by side. I'd never thought much about Varen technology beyond how to disable it. But hearing her explain its workings, in a mix of technical terms and soft, accented English, was grounding. She knew her stuff. By late afternoon, the truck was purring again. I was about to close the shop when I noticed her leaning against the wall, eyes distant. You all right? I asked. Her voice was barely audible. It feels strange to help, without being told I will be punished if I fail. I studied her for a moment. Well, you did good work. No punishment here. That seemed to puzzle her more than anything else today. We headed back inside as the sky dimmed, the temperature dropping like a stone. Over dinner, I told her a little about myself, ex-soldier, came here after the war, trying to keep out of other people's messes. She listened, but I noticed she never offered her own stories unless I asked directly. Later, as I stoked the fire, she lingered in the doorway. Ethan, she said slowly, as if testing my name, if they come, what will you do? I looked at her. That depends. If they come asking nicely, maybe we talk. If they come like your husband did, I'll make sure they regret it. For a long moment, she held my gaze. Then, with a slight incline of her head, she disappeared into the guest room. I sat alone in the firelight, sipping what was left of my coffee. I'd meant to keep my life simple. No politics, no wars, no alien trouble. But looking at the closed door to her room, I knew something had shifted. Whatever storm was chasing Lyra, I just planted myself right in its path. The past hunts us. 3 days passed without incident, but the quiet only made me uneasy. Out here, calm rarely lasted. Lyra was adapting to the rhythms of my homestead. Mornings by the stove, afternoons helping in the workshop, evenings in the faint glow of the oil lamp. She spoke more now, though every sentence still carried a trace of hesitation, like she was weighing each word against unseen consequences. I'd almost convinced myself we might stay invisible out here. Then I went into town. The outpost wasn't much, a cluster of prefab buildings, a fuel depot, and a cantina that doubled as a post office. I'd gone to pick up supplies, kerosene, salt, and a replacement filter for the water pump. The usual. But when I stepped inside, I caught the tail end of a conversation at the counter. So they were looking for a woman, the shopkeeper was telling a miner. Not human. Pretty thing, dark hair, golden eyes. They showed me a holo. The miner whistled. You think she's trouble? They didn't say, just that she's missing. Big reward for anyone who points them in the right direction. My hand froze on the filter I'd been reaching for. My instinct screamed at me to walk away, but I forced myself to move casual-like, paying for my supplies as if nothing had stuck in my ears. Back on the road, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, I couldn't shake the tension in my gut. They were already sniffing around. Varen enforcers didn't offer big rewards unless the target mattered. And if they found her here, there wouldn't be a polite conversation before they dragged her off. When I got home, Lyra was sitting on the porch steps, mending one of my old jackets with careful stitches. She looked up at the sound of the truck, a faint smile forming before she caught the look on my face. What happened? She asked. I killed the engine. Words out. They've been showing your face around town. Her hands stilled. Enforcers. Sounds like it. I carried the supplies inside, but the weight in my chest didn't lighten. You need to tell me exactly why they want you back so badly. She followed me in, shutting the door quietly behind her. Because I left. That's not enough. A Varen noble's cast-off wife. They'd just let you disappear. Unless. Her eyes flickered. Not fear? Exactly. But something sharper. I know things. Things they do not want your people to hear. I set the supplies on the counter. What kind of things? She glanced toward the window, as if the planes beyond were listening. Council meetings, trade negotiations, border agreements. My husband, he spoke freely around me, because I was nothing to him. Invisible. But I remember. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. So you've got leverage. Her voice dropped. If the human colonies knew what I know, they could stop a war or start one. That settled it. She wasn't just a refugee. She was a liability to powerful people, and they wouldn't rest until she was gone or silent forever. We'll need to be careful, I said. No more trips to town. If they get a trail, it'll be harder to lose them. She nodded, but her gaze lingered on me for a moment. You are already in danger because of me. Yeah, I said, meeting her eyes. And I'll deal with it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check the windows, scanning the horizon for headlights or shuttle lights. The cold moonlight painted everything silver, and every shadow looked like it might move. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall. I was halfway to the gun rack before I realized it was Lyra. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket I'd given her. You are not sleeping, she said softly. Neither are you. She stepped closer, the lamplight catching in her eyes. I hear things outside. I think I hear them even when they are not there. I set the rifle back down. It's just the wind, but I'll keep watch. She hesitated, then sat down in the armchair across from me. We stayed like that for a while, the fire popping softly between us. At some point, she began to talk, not about the council's secrets, but about her childhood. I used to watch the sky from my mother's window, she said. She told me humans looked up and saw freedom. Varens looked up and saw conquest. She wanted me to see both. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. Sometimes, silence was better than trying to find the right words. By dawn, I'd decided on a plan. We couldn't stay here forever. The enforcers would close in eventually, and when they did, they wouldn't come politely. But moving her meant risking exposure. I needed to know how close they were. The next day, I took the old comm scanner out of storage. It had been a long time since I'd used it, but it still hummed to life. I set it to sweep for Varen encrypted transmissions. Late in the afternoon, I caught a faint ping. Not close, but not far either. Someone was probing the area, sending short-range locator bursts. My stomach sank. They were looking for her, and they were getting closer. When I told Lyra, she didn't flinch. She just wrapped the blanket tighter and said, I told you they would come. That night, she didn't go to her room. She sat on the floor by the stove while I cleaned my sidearm, the glow painting her features in gold and shadow. If they find you, I said quietly, what will they do? She met my gaze. Kill me. Not quickly, and they will tell my death as a warning to others. I nodded slowly. Then they won't find you. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. Not with trust, not yet, but with the faintest edge of belief. Outside, the wind carried the scent of snow. Somewhere out there, the hunters were circling in. And in here, I'd just made up my mind. If they wanted her, they'd have to go through me. Building trust. The storm rolled in before dawn, hammering the plains with sleet and wind. Out here, weather could cut you off from the world in minutes, so we stayed indoors. I spent the morning checking the power cells and patching the roof leak over the storage room. Lyra stayed by the stove, mending one of my work shirts with the same careful stitches she'd used on the jacket days earlier. She was quiet, but not in the fearful way she'd been before. This was a different kind of quiet, focused, deliberate. You do that better than I can, I said, dropping into the chair across from her. Her fingers paused over the needle. I had to learn. When fabric is rare, you repair everything, even things not worth saving. Her words carried more weight than she probably intended. Guess I'm the same way with machines, I said. Don't like throwing something out if I can keep it running. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine for just a moment. People, too. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes. She seemed to consider that, then went back to stitching. When the worst of the storm eased in the afternoon, I decided to show her something. My shop wasn't much, a mix of old human tools and a few alien gadgets I'd salvaged over the years. She followed me in. glancing around like she'd stepped into a museum. "This," I said, pointing to the bench, "is where I spend most of my time. And this," I tapped the stripped-down comm unit in front of me, "is today's project." She tilted her head. "Outdated. Model is 15 cycles old. Closer to 20. But it still works." "Barely," she said, but there was no mockery in it. Just fact. I started working on the wiring. After a few minutes, I noticed she'd moved closer, watching my hands. "You want to help?" I asked. She hesitated, then reached for the small soldering tool. Her grip was precise, almost elegant, as she fused the connections without wasting a drop of material. "Not bad," I said. "I told you," she replied quietly. "I repaired vessels, even the ones they didn't think I could." That sentence hung in the air. I didn't ask her what they had done when she proved them wrong. I already had an idea. Days turned into a new kind of routine. In the mornings, she helped me check the perimeter sensors. In the afternoons, she worked beside me in the shop. Evenings were spent in the glow of the stove, her curled up in the armchair while I read old paperbacks or tinkered with small projects. It wasn't just the work. It was the small things, the way she'd hum softly when she thought I wasn't listening, the way her eyes lit up when she figured out a repair before I did, the way she'd pause before taking the last piece of bread as if waiting for permission. One night, as I was patching a tear in my coat, she came over and took the needle from my hand without a word. She sat down beside me and worked in silence, the rhythm of her stitching steady and sure. "You don't have to do everything for me," I said. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." That was the first time she'd said something like that. Not out of obligation, not because she was told to, but because she chose to. The first real crack in her armor came during a cold snap a few nights later. The wind screamed against the walls, and the temperature inside dropped fast. I was hauling extra firewood in when I found her sitting by the bed in the guest room, arms wrapped around herself, shivering despite the blankets. "You're freezing," I said, grabbing another quilt from the hall. "It is worse than cold," she murmured. "It is the same as when they would leave me outside. 4 hours. To remind me." Her voice trailed off. I set the quilt around her shoulders, but she didn't stop shaking. Without thinking too much, I guided her toward my room where the stove heat was strongest. "You can take the bed tonight," I said. She looked up at me, eyes searching. "Where will you sleep?" "I'll take the chair." But she shook her head. "That is foolish. We share." Her tone was matter-of-fact, like she was stating a technical solution to a problem. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew what shared space meant in her world. Still, I saw the way her shoulders curled inward, and I understood that this wasn't about closeness. It was about safety. So we shared. I kept to my side, the blanket drawn between us like a border. But sometime in the night, I woke to find her curled slightly toward me, her breathing slow and even. I didn't move her. Maybe I didn't want to. The next morning, the wind had eased, and sunlight poured through the small window. Lyra was already up, making tea in the kitchen. The sight was unexpectedly grounding, like I'd woken into a different kind of life without realizing it. Over breakfast, I caught her watching me. When I met her gaze, she didn't look away this time. "What?" I asked. "You are different from most humans I have known," she said. "Different how?" "You do not ask for what you think you deserve. You give without asking anything back." I chuckled. "You've been here, what, 2 weeks? Give it time." But her expression stayed serious. "I think you mean it." I didn't have an answer for that. So I finished my coffee and told her about the plan I'd been forming, a way to keep watch without drawing attention. We'd rotate shifts at night, scan for transmissions every few hours, and make sure the truck was ready to move on short notice. She listened carefully, nodding at the right moments. But before I could stand, she said something that caught me off guard. "If we must leave, I will not run alone this time." Her voice was steady, but the meaning was clear. If she had to face what was coming, she'd face it with me. And for the first time since she'd arrived, I realized that maybe I wanted the same thing. The signal in the dark. It started with a faint, rhythmic blip on the comm scanner, so faint I almost missed it. I'd been cycling through frequencies after midnight, the low hum filling the shop, when the signal came again. 3 short pulses, a pause, then 2 longer ones. Not random. A locator code. I leaned closer to the display, narrowing the sweep. The pulses repeated every 30 seconds. That meant it wasn't a ship, it was something small. Personal. I didn't like the answer that crept into my mind. The tracker. In the morning, I found Lyra in the workshop, cleaning the soldering tip. She'd picked up the habit of occupying herself with repairs while I worked, her hands steadier now than the day she'd arrived. I shut the door behind me, locking it. "We need to talk," I said. Her eyes lifted immediately. "They are here." "Not here. Yet. But they are looking. I picked up a signal last night, short range, pointed at us. You're carrying it." For a moment, she didn't react. Then she set the tool down. "The wrist," she said, pulling back her sleeve. There, near the thin ridge where human skin met faint alien scaling, was a small, raised bump. Almost invisible. "When?" I asked. "The day I was claimed. They said it was for safety. In truth, it was so I could never run." I examined it closely, smaller than a grain of rice, but likely tied to a Varen locator array. Removing it would be tricky. Some models sent an immediate alert if tampered with. "We could dig it out," I said. "But if it pings an alert, they'll know exactly where to come." Her gaze was steady. "They already know I am in human space. It is only time." "Time's exactly what we need," I replied. "If we remove it too soon, they'll rush us. I want them guessing for as long as possible." She hesitated, then nodded. Then we wait. That night, the signal strengthened. It wasn't constant. They were sweeping the area in passes, testing for a stronger return. I kept the scanner running while Lyra stayed near the fire, quiet, watching the shadows beyond the window. After a while, she asked, "If they come, would you leave me to save yourself?" I looked up sharply. "No, you should," she said softly. "You owe me nothing." "Maybe not, but I'm not in the habit of letting people get dragged off to be executed." She studied me in that way she did sometimes, like she was measuring the truth in my words. "Then, I will tell you something." She shifted in her chair, voice dropping lower. "There was a meeting, weeks before I fled. My husband and others discussed the human border treaties. They planned to break them, to take colonies while pretending to negotiate peace." I sat forward. "You're sure?" "I heard it myself. Dates, targets. They believe humans are too divided to act fast." The weight of it settled between us. That kind of intelligence wasn't just valuable. It was dangerous enough to get her killed twice over. "You realize," I said, "if we get you to the right people, you could change the course of that war before it starts." Her lips pressed together. "If we live long enough." We kept the lights low for the next 2 days. I parked the truck behind the workshop, out of sight from the main road. We moved quietly, listening for the faintest hum of engines in the night. The signal on the scanner came and went, sometimes strong enough to make the hair on my arms rise. On the 3rd night, I woke to the faint crunch of snow outside. I was up instantly, rifle in hand, signaling for Lyra to stay back. The sound circled the house, then moved away, slow, deliberate footsteps. I waited until silence returned before checking the scanner. The signal spike was gone. Whoever it was, they weren't broadcasting anymore. When I came back inside, Lyra was standing in the kitchen, a knife in her hand. She didn't look afraid, just ready. "They will be back," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "And next time, it won't be a walk around. They'll come to take you." We spent the next day preparing. I packed emergency supplies, water filters, rations, ammunition. A short-range comm. Lyra worked on modifying one of my old signal jammers, adapting it with Varen components from my salvage bin. "You really think this'll work?" I asked. "It will block the locator for short bursts," she said without looking up. "Enough to make them doubt their readings. And if they don't doubt..." She met my eyes. "Then we run." That night, we sat together by the stove, the fire painting the room in shifting gold. I'd intended to keep watch alone, but Lyra brought her blanket and settled on the floor beside me. You should sleep, I said. I cannot. When I close my eyes, I see the way they look when they come, as if you are already dead, and they are just collecting the body. There was no right answer to that, so I said nothing. Instead, I checked the scanner again. The signal was back, faint but constant this time. They've narrowed it down, I said. Maybe a few kilometers. She wrapped the blanket tighter, her voice almost a whisper. Then tomorrow, they will be closer. I looked at her, the faint shimmer in her eyes, the stubborn line of her jaw despite the fear she carried. Then tomorrow, we'll be ready. We stayed like that until the fire burned low, the dark pressing in around the edges of the room. Somewhere beyond the walls, the hunters were moving, and inside, I knew we were running out of time. When the hunters came, the storm came first. Snow like powdered glass swept sideways across the hills, burying every sound beneath the howl of the wind. I'd almost convinced myself the signal would be lost in the white noise, that maybe we'd get one more night. Then the scanner's tone changed, a steady, climbing pitch. They've locked on, I said. Lyra didn't flinch. She simply reached for the jammer she'd been working on, tightening the last bolt. Then we use this now. No, I told her, shaking my head. If we jam them this early, they'll know they're close and storm the place fast. We need to make them think they're on the wrong trail, at least until they step into the open. Her gaze flicked to the rifle leaning against the wall. You will fight them. I'll do more than that. The first sign wasn't visual. It was the low, guttural thrum of Varen thruster coils, so close it rattled the panes in their frames. I killed the lamps, motioning for Lyra to take the crawl space hatch in the kitchen floor. She hesitated. I touched her shoulder. If I don't come back, you don't wait for daylight. You run east to the ridge. You'll find a human outpost. Show them the intel. Her lips pressed tight, but she nodded and disappeared into the shadows. A sharp knock came at the front door, deliberate, mocking. 3 taps, a pause, 2 more. The same pattern as the tracker's pulses. I didn't answer. I slid to the side window, sighting through the rifle scope. 3 figures stood in the swirling snow, tall, armored, their breath steaming. The lead one's armor was painted with the bone-white sigils of a hunter caste. The other 2 carried short plasma lances. They didn't knock again. The front door shuddered under the impact of something heavy. A second strike ripped the lock straight out of the frame. I squeezed the trigger. The shot punched through the storm, taking the nearest hunter in the shoulder. He staggered, his weapon flaring into the snow. The leader barked something in Varen, and they fanned out. I ducked as a plasma bolt hissed through the window frame, searing the air. The smell of scorched wood filled the room. The fight turned into a slow, brutal chess game. I knew my house better than they did, knew every blind corner, every shadow where I could move unseen. Twice, I caught one in my sights, firing before they could close the gap. Twice, they missed with weapons that would have gutted me in an instant. But they were advancing, room by room. They were cutting off escape routes. The leader finally stepped into the kitchen, his visor reflecting the dying firelight. His voice was deep, almost conversational. Human, give her to us, and you may live. I leaned against the doorframe opposite him, rifle steady. Not happening. You do not understand. She carries our shame. She is marked by impurity. Her life is forfeit. Then why are you here instead of the execution block? I asked. You want her silenced before she talks. His visor tilted slightly, and I knew I'd hit close to the truth. A sudden crash split the air, the side window bursting inward as one of the others forced his way through. I fired on instinct, dropping him before he could level his lance. The leader roared something guttural and charged. He was fast, faster than a human in armor had any right to be. I barely swung the rifle up in time to block the blow from his gauntlet. The force of it sent me skidding across the kitchen floor, ribs screaming. The plasma lance hissed to life in his grip. Before he could strike, the air shimmered, and a pulse of static ripped through the room. The jammer. Lyra emerged from the crawl space, the device in her hands humming with raw interference. The leader's visor flickered, the lance sputtering. I lunged, driving the rifle butt into his helmet. He stumbled, and Lyra was already moving. Fast, precise, plunging a kitchen blade into the joint where his armor met his neck plating. The sound he made wasn't a scream. It was a low, animal growl as he collapsed. The last hunter burst through the back door, but I was ready. One shot, clean through the chest, dropped him onto the snow. For a long moment, only the wind filled the silence. Then Lyra spoke, voice trembling just slightly. "We have to go. Others will come." I looked at the leader's body, the white sigils now streaked with blood. She was right. This was just the first wave. We moved quickly, packs on, weapons loaded, jammer strapped to Lyra's chest. Outside, the snow had already begun to bury the fallen hunters, erasing the evidence of what had happened. As we crested the ridge east of the workshop, I glanced back once. The place looked small now, dark against the white. "That was your home," Lyra said quietly. "Was," I replied. "Now it's just the place they'll search while we're gone." She didn't argue. We camped in the lee of the ridge that night. No fire, no light. Lyra sat beside me, her shoulders tight beneath the blanket. "They will not stop," she said. "I know. They will kill you." I looked at her, the faint glint of starlight in her alien eyes. "Then I'll make sure they never get the chance." For a while, we just listened to the wind. Somewhere far behind us, I thought I heard engines again, faint, searching, and I knew tomorrow would be wise. The last line. We reached the outpost just before dawn. The ridge path was treacherous, a narrow cut between jagged black rock and sheer drops dusted with snow. My boots slipped more than once, and Lyra's breathing had turned ragged. The cold was brutal, but worse was the constant awareness of engines somewhere behind us, echoing faintly in the valleys. When the first human guard spotted us through his visor, his rifle came up. "Identify." "Ethan Vale," I called. "Civilian, former militia. She's with me. We've got critical intel." The guard didn't lower his weapon right away. His gaze lingered on Lyra, the angular planes of her face, the strange silver cast to her skin. Then he tapped his calm command. "You're gonna want to see this." Inside the outpost, warmth hit like a hammer. The sudden shift almost made me dizzy. We were ushered into a steel-walled command room, heaters humming in the corners. A captain stood over a table map, lines of troop movements lit in red holographic projection. "This the intel carrier?" he asked, jerking his chin toward Lyra. "She is," I said before Lyra could speak. "She's been hunted across half the range to get here. And she's got names, traitors, supply lines, fleet routes. Everything." The captain's eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust her?" Lyra's voice was steady, though I saw the tremor in her hands. "Because your own generals made deals with mine. And because if you don't act, their fleet will burn 3 of your colonies before you can blink." The captain's jaw tightened. "All right, let's hear it." For the next hour, Lyra spoke, not hesitating, not softening the truth. She described covert shipyards hidden in asteroid shadows, coded transmissions between human officials and Varen warlords, and the location of a forward assault fleet already positioned beyond the Kuiper relay. Every so often, I caught the captain's expression shifting, from skepticism to realization to something like grim resolve. By the time she finished, his posture had changed completely. "You understand," he said. "If this checks out, you've just given us a fighting chance." Lyra met his gaze. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I'm tired of running." We didn't get the luxury of rest. Before the captain could issue orders, alarms ripped through the base. A young comms officer's voice cracked over the intercom. Multiple inbound signatures, unidentified but closing fast. 30 clicks out. I felt it in my gut. They tracked us. The captain barked orders. "All units to defensive positions. Vale, you armed?" I checked my rifle, the weight familiar. "Always." Lyra moved to stand beside me. The captain's eyes narrowed. "She doesn't fight." "She does," I countered, "and you'll be glad she's on your side." We took positions on the north barricade, a wall of steel plates and portable shields overlooking the approach valley. The first snow-blurred shapes appeared on the horizon within minutes, sleek, black-armored figures fanning out with predatory precision. Varan hunters, at least a dozen. The air filled with the whine of charging plasma. The first bolt screamed overhead, searing holes into the barricade's outer layer. Human rifles answered, their sharp reports cutting through the wind. "Hold your fire," I told Lyra. "Pick your shots." She nodded, crouched low, eyes locked on the nearest hunter breaking from the group. Her first shot dropped him in a spray of snow and blood. The battle turned fast and ugly. Hunters didn't waste time with slow advances. They leapt the barricade when they could, forcing brutal close-quarters fights. I found myself grappling with one twice my size, his gauntlet crushing into my ribs. I drove my knife into the seam under his arm, felt him shudder and fall. Beside me, Lyra fought with a fierce, efficient rhythm, rifle to blade, blade to rifle, as if each motion was calculated for survival. We were holding, barely, until the shimmer appeared in the snow line. At first, I thought it was heat haze. Then a shape resolved. Tall, heavier armored, moving with terrifying speed. The lead hunter, the same caste that had come for us at my home. He didn't waste time. He vaulted the barricade in one fluid motion, slamming into me with the force of a charging bull. My rifle flew from my hands. I rolled, just barely avoiding the lance strike that split the ground where my head had been. Lyra shouted something, firing at him. The bolt sparked against his shield field, but didn't slow him. He turned toward her, and something inside me snapped. I lunged, wrapping my arm around his weapon arm, dragging it sideways. His gauntleted fist smashed into my jaw, but I held on. "Now!" I yelled. Lyra didn't hesitate. She jammed the barrel of her rifle into the gap between his helmet and chest plate, squeezed the trigger. The burst tore through him point blank. His body dropped like a felled tree. The remaining hunters faltered, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Human soldiers surged forward, driving them back with concentrated fire. One by one, they fell or vanished into the storm. When the last shot faded, the valley was littered with black shapes against white snow. We stood at the barricade, breath steaming, hands still tight on our weapons. The captain approached, his gaze moving from me to Lyra. "You bought us time," he said simply, "and I think we'll be needing both of you before this war's over." Lyra glanced at me. I could read the exhaustion in her, but also something harder, more determined. "We're not done running," I said, "but maybe we get to choose where we run next." The captain gave a short nod. "Debrief in 10. Then we start moving on that intel." That night, the outpost was quiet again. We'd lost people, good people, but we'd also stopped the hunters cold. And for the first time since she'd appeared on my doorstep, Lyra wasn't looking over her shoulder. She sat beside me in the barracks bunk, the same way she had back at my home when we first shared a bed out of necessity. Only now, the silence wasn't heavy with fear. "You didn't have to fight like that," she said softly. "Yes, I did." Her hand found mine under the blanket. "Then I'm glad it was you they left me with." Outside, the wind still howled. But for now, the hunters were gone. And tomorrow, we'd take the fight to them.